Well, I was fortunate. I warmed this up with a hairdryer and the bracket came loose straight away. One of the foil strips came off very shortly after that, and I've just glued that back in place. But the prism still looks very good, so I think I'm going to do okay with that prism. So I'll just pop that to one side and its bracket. The frame, I've cleaned that inside and out with acetone. I've removed all trace of the old adhesive. So that's all nice and clean and ready to go. Now, my plastic split image piece, I've got that all cleaned. That's gone through the ultrasonic cleaner and all the mildew spots are gone. That's nice and clean now. That's just looks really good. There was a patch on there, I think I showed you earlier. In fact, I pointed to it. There was a patch, like a dull patch. That's still present. So whatever that was, I'm not even sure which surface that's on. It looks like it's on the prism surface. Something has affected the plastic at that point. Now I've got no idea what did that. Whether there was some contaminant in there between that and the ground glass, I just do not know. But that's still there, but that's well off to one side of the frame. I'm not expecting that to really cause any problems at all. So I've got that ready to go on. Of course, I haven't cleaned up my glass components yet. I've got my 6 tiny little black screws all cleaned from the had to clean those with acetone to remove all traces of the lacquer that was holding them in. But I've got to clean my glass components now, so I better get on to that. And I'll start with the ground glass screen, and then I'll get the components stacked up in order. Assembling these is always pretty tedious because you're trying to keep them dust free. Well, with all the glass, you've got, what do we got there? We've got a plastic screen, we've got the ground glass on top of it, we've got 2 condenser lenses on top of that. Well, that's a lot of surfaces that once they're sitting down in place, you can't blow the dust off them. You can only blow the dust off the surfaces that you can easily get to. So you have to make sure each surface is scrupulously clean before you put the next component in place. And as you can imagine, that doesn't always work out well. I'm going to start putting these components together now. Now the plastic screen has 2 tiny screw marks in there where the adjustment screws went at the front. I've got to find them. Looks there, I think. This goes prism side up. I've got to get this thing seated in there. Of course, it wants to drop in at an angle and jam up, so see if I can get that to seat. Okay, so that's sitting down in place. I can already see a speck of dust on there. I don't know whether it's on the top side or the bottom side. Looks like it's on the underneath side. So we're not off to a flying start. I've got my ground glass screen. That's all clean. Drop that in position. Push that down into place. Now I can see some imperfection at one edge there. I don't know whether that's a speck of dust, so I've got to start all over again. And as you're probably already guessing, this gets to be very tedious. Yeah, there's that mark on that. It's on the underside. I've got to see if it'll come off. Yeah, it was stuck there with static. The ground glass side down. And looking down at that, all appears well so far. It's a metal mask that goes in there now. You can see a speck of dust at one end. I don't know where it is. I think it's on the ground glass. It's on the underside of the ground glass. So I've got to tip that out and start again. I'm checking my ground glass, looking to see if there's any speck on there. There's a speck that's on the screen. It's not on the ground glass, it's on the screen. Yeah, it was on that top surface. See if I can blow that away. Get my ground glass in there. That looks okay. Get my mask in there. That looks okay. Now the plano convex lens has to go in next to make sure that's absolutely dust free. That's dropped into place. That's looking good. This spacer arrangement, slide that down into place. Still okay, no inclusions. The biconvex condenser, getting this in place is more tricky. That appears to be sitting there nicely. The two spring clips. One. Two. They're in place. So that's looking good. The prism, I've got to clean the prism. I've only got two surfaces that need to be cleaned on the prism. This one here's got some glue on it. I'm not going to fight that off because it's really hard to see the last of that from the glass. I'll just clean above it. And the base here, of course, of the prism we just clean that surface. It looks very clean, but of course I don't know whether it's as good as it looks or whether there's a smear of something on it. That looks good. Now the prism sits on there like that. I'm going to hold it up to the light and see if it looks all clean. I can see some specks. I'm trying to figure out where they are. They may be defects in the silvering. I'm not seeing anything on the screen. I think that'll be good. I've got to cut my tape and put the tape round there next. The tape I've got here is a Scotch tape brand. It's a plastic tape that's reinforced with cloth so it doesn't stretch. But to get this in here so it seals the prism to the base. Cut those edges, fold those down. This tape's very sticky. It's hard to cut it without it sticking to the scissors. And this tape is all for one purpose really. It's to keep the dust out. Alright, I'll put a piece down this side, then I can get the bracket in place. Alright, I'll have one more look through this. Make sure there's nothing awful going on in there. That looks okay. This is the bracket that held it all down in place. Where's that other little screw? There it is. Okay, now I want a piece of tape across the back. Make sure it's clear at this point, otherwise it'll foul the cocking rack. And all these sticky bits and pieces here I'm trimming off. You have to be very careful to make sure I get rid of all of them, because otherwise they'll end up sticking on something I don't want them sticking on. Okay, so far so good. Now that looks good. That's looking good so far. Now these patches on here, 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 here and here need to be covered with tape. It's just tangled up into a big mess. Oh. Get another piece of tape. This stuff's really sticky. Let's take that piece, stick it on there. Stick a piece on there. And two longer pieces now for those edges. Don't want any wrinkles in it because it won't fit. I think we only want one more piece. That's it. Now I've got some moisture on there, I don't know where that's come from. Looks like it's gone away, I don't know where that appeared from. Okay, the 6 screws need to go in. I can get them started with a bigger screwdriver. It's easier to get that screwdriver into the slots of the screws. Something sticky on there, sticking to my tweezers. As you can probably guess, cleaning viewfinders in the Retina Reflex cameras is not my favourite job. Once I've got these 6 screws all started, then I've got to go through the process of adjusting the screws to push the plastic split image component to centre it up with the hole in the ground glass. It's most disconcerting if it's off to one side. Okay, so they're all in place. I'm looking at this. I can see that the split image is too far in this direction, so I need to push it back that way. That's about right. And then make sure the other screws are just done up snug. Well, that's looking good. That prism's centered in the ground glass quite nicely. That surface looks clean. I'm going to get some lacquer, clear nail varnish, and put a spot on each of those 6 screws to stop them drifting. So I'll transfer some of this lacquer to a toothpick. Coming from this direction, put a spot on that screw head and take away the tool to this direction, away from that ground glass screen. And do this one the same. Coming from this direction, put a spot on there, retreat to this direction so that I'm not dragging any trails of lacquer across that lens. If I was to get any hint of this on that plastic lens, it would not be good. So you've got to make sure you've got no threads of the stuff blowing anywhere blown in the wind, and pull away from it this way. come in from this direction, touch it, come back this way. So if you produce any threads of it, you're pulling that away from that plastic lens. The same here, coming from this direction, pull away from it. Just one more to go. Come in from this direction, the touch on there, come back in this direction. That's good. I'm going to stop right now because the video camera is telling me the battery is tired. So with that finder nice and clean, I think I can put it into the camera. I'll just move that film advance out the way. That should seat down nicely in the body, it does. And if I find the screws, I can fix this in place. Just punch a hole through that tape. Get that screw. Get it started. Do the same on the other side. And at the back we've got the mask there to go on. That glass surface, I'd like to clean that before I put the mask in place, so I'll just get some glass cleaner on a cotton bud. Just clean that surface. Hopefully it'll clean well. That looks good. Have this mask that goes on there. Get this screw down through there. It doesn't seem to be going in smoothly. It might just be the tape it's picked up. Yeah, I think that's all it was. And this little wee screw that went beside it. One of the screws goes down into the body, the nickel plated one. The black screw just goes down into the base, the black base plate of that finder. Okay, so that's in place. I'll tighten these two screws here. That should be my prism all in, and it should be good. Now if I put the camera top cover on, I can look out the window and see if the focus appears correct in the finder. I know it's good at the screen. No, that's spot on. That's very good. So that part of the job is done. We're just about at the closing up stage here. I'll run some molybdenum paste through the film release button. I'll run some down the slot there where the shutter release shaft is going to run. And the shutter release is here. I'll put its return spring on it. Put that into place there. Now the meter is the meter that came with this camera, which originally began its life with a Retina 3 big C, I expect. I'll just clean that plastic window. Set this in place. Now I did notice something else about this. The meter should have looked like this. Instead it looks like this. Now you notice it's got a plastic button, a bobble sticking up right there. Well, there's no hole in the body for that to sit. In a Retina 3C camera there'd have been a little pocket in the body for that to sit into. There's nothing here, so that needs to come off. It'd be making the meter sit cockeyed if we were just to leave that in there. You want the thing to sit down nice and flush. I better find my scalpel. That one there too, I think. Yes, they would have mounted to the, or fitted into the body on a Retina 3 Big C. Of course they don't fit into anything on this camera. That would just sit there like that. And what I've got in the body is that plastic spacer there, which will stop the lever here rotating. That should be good. I'll clean up my top cover. There's our shutter release button first, that goes on there. I'll clean up my top cover now, which doesn't require much at all. I've got to clean the window in it. A bit grimy, that eyepiece. It is just plain glass. Oh, it is actually, it's a lens, that one. It's not just plain glass, but it is glass. You can clean it with glass cleaner and a cotton bud. You can be fairly vigorous with it. It's not unusual for the back surface to be a little bit scratched, and that's because people have typically cleaned that with the end of their dirty, gritty finger, the end of their tie, tail of a t-shirt, anything at all. That's all looking good. Pop this in place. Well, that's on number 1, so that's about what you'd expect. And the frame counter is moving around neatly, so that's all looking good. I think the top cover can be fitted down in place now. No, I think I'll put some, before I do that, I'm just going to put some synthetic grease on the gear here. Excuse me. Get my meter in place, the shutter release in place, top cover in place. Get this screw in place. Now you can see that marks on the top there, that's where the whole top cover had shifted across so that this screw wasn't seated correctly because the camera had been dropped at some stage. That's good. Excuse me while I get rid of some of this sticky tape residue. And my spare meter is just gathering up everything in sight that's sticky. It's magnetic. Right. This screw for the end of the top housing. Now the top housing here has got quite a pronounced polished look to it round here. Suggests that a strap end had been rubbing on that. Should have 2 chrome plated screws for the top cover. Just looking at the fit of the top cover on the camera body, it's good now. It was a bit off before because of the drop damage. Right, so the little spacer goes on there, and our rewind knob I haven't yet assembled, so I better get that done.